what was the process for setting up the manufacturing in Canada and getting a licensing approval? Because that's something that many people are asking me. And even on my channel, I get a lot of questions after my videos when people are questioning the Canadian way of doing things, like licensing medical products, because Canada takes it very seriously when it comes to health related products in general. So what was your experience with that?
Well, thankfully, Merle had been through a lot of these steps before. And so the licensing, it is a process. There's a lot of paperwork to fill out, and then it literally sits on someone's desk in Health Canada until they get to it and fill it out. I took 18 months to get, even though the paperwork is not a huge amount. There is paperwork. It's not journals of paperwork, but there is some. But it takes a long time for it to be reviewed. And the biggest kind of hurdle we had with that is that nasal rinses as a rinse had not been licensed in Canada previously. So even though there were things that were there, this is the first, pre-made rinse that was available for licensing. And that was a bit of a hurdle to get through. So we had to share it with them, a ton of research papers. And once they saw that, we got the approval. But it did take almost 18 months to get that approval. So that's a long time compared to the US, where as a class 1 medical device, it took 2 weeks. We literally fill out your application and you pay your $6,000 a year and you are registered. And so it's very easy in the US to get that approval. The biggest hurdle I think that we would have had in Canada with manufacturing is the cost of startup. So thankfully, I was able to connect with Merle and the people making the solution who really had everything already in place. We just had to buy a few small pieces of equipment in order to, fill the bags up with the solution and have it sealed so it wouldn't leak. And that was a bit of a process in itself, but we were able to get that and get our manufacturing down. That will be getting better as our volumes increase. We have a high-speed filling machine, which will essentially allow us to produce 5 to 7 times more in a day once we get to that level of sales, hopefully sooner than later. In terms of the bottles, it took a while to get the bottles designed. I worked with a fluid engineer to get that done, and we actually produced the bottles here just outside of Calgary at a plastics manufacturing plant. And had to do that on your own. To set this type of facility up and to make bottles and to make solution probably would have cost well over $1 million to get everything in place. So there's no way I ever would have done that on my own. So I think if you're starting up on a business, find who you can work with. I think is very important because you don't have to reinvent the wheel for every new creation. You can find people who are already doing what you need done. It may not be the exact same thing, but you can always adapt to it. Or adapt the process to fit your needs. And I think that's important to do and save you a lot of time and money. Patents were very expensive in terms of getting patents set up. We are patented in terms of the bottle and the solution and the combination of the two, which is important. But patents are extremely expensive. And we were very fortunate to find an excellent patent agent here in Calgary who we work with. We were able to get some government grants to help with the early stages of the patent application and the process. But we're 5-6 years into it, and we're still battling some of the patents. And it's not cheap to do that. We have several patents. We have one in Canada here, which was easier to get. We're working on the US currently, finalizing everything, Australia and Europe. And so working on those. The US has been challenging for patents. Just a little bit of a different process, but you have to remember every time you're going to do these things, it's going to cost you money and time. So you have to, unless you have the time and the knowledge to do it on your own, expect to pay a ton of money for your patents. It's not an inexpensive process. Okay,
well, you actually partially answered my next question I had for you, the comparison between Canadian market and the US market, because you're one of those companies that actually compare, considering you are applying for, you're working on patents in the US. You're also expanding into US and trying to bring the product to the US. And you mentioned that so far the regulatory component was easier in the US than in Canada. What else you can use as an example in comparison between the two, and why you think the US market is important for your company? Because I think it's also something to consider for anyone who is trying to set up something in North America and choosing in between two countries.
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing with the US and why you want to expand into the US is they have 10 times the population. And right there, your business has a greater chance of growing because of that. What we have found is it is a lot cheaper to transport our product in the US than it is in Canada. So we can send products to Phoenix or to Denver, pardon me, essentially for the same cost. I can send it to Edmonton or Toronto. Actually, a lot cheaper than sending things to Toronto. So with getting down to the US, it's less expensive to get it down there, but you're going to get a greater population to potentially buy your product for a lot less investment. And it's interesting talking to my colleagues in the US who've been in practice for longer, as long as I have, feel that Americans are more likely to pay for a premium product, which is always interesting. Canadians, for the most part, don't like to pay for healthcare or a lot of things that we can get
take it for granted potentially, considering the system you're in.
Exactly. I see that in my practice every day. I do procedures here in the office, for helping people breathe better for, a few $100s for disposable cost. And I've had, CFOs of major companies blow up on me for having the audacity to want to charge them. And then I see a lot of patients who, expats who moved up to Canada here, who, when talk to them about surgery or needing things, the first thing they say is, well, how much is this going to cost? And, and what do I have to? So they aren't afraid to spend money on premium products and services. And so I think that's where growing in the US is important.
I want to bring it up because you mentioned before that one benefit of doing it in Canada is the idea of having higher standards of making something. So the quality of the product automatically goes into a higher level right away. So
Yep.
that's something that we definitely need to bring up. So that's the difference too.
Now, in order to produce this product in Canada, we have to be produced kind of at a pharmaceutical standard.
Yeah.
So we are produced in a GMP facility, which is very few of those in the country. So we're producing our solution essentially at pharmaceutical standards. We're made essentially in the same place where veterinary pharmaceuticals are made. So it's very high end. Where if we were in the US, probably
it wouldn't be the same type of.
It would not be the same. You can do it in a much lower, less controlled environment. So our regulations, the quality assurance, quality control that we go through is second to none.
But that's why I think Canadian product, and this product specifically, deserves that to be called as a higher end product or high standard product. So to me, that's also one of those benefits.
Yeah, the analogy we always like to use is it's champagne versus a cheap sparkling, right? And so if you're producing a true champagne, it's coming from one region in France, and versus something else that's made cheap grape somewhere else. So it's kind of the analogy we like to use on that. So creating a true, an affordable product that everybody can get and use easily.
Yeah. But I think this would put Canada on that level. I think in terms of
I agree. 100%.
The name and the standard, I think, and this is why maybe for people who are considering starting business in Canada, that's something that they need to also equate. Just thinking, if you will achieve that in Canada, it automatically puts you in that position of higher standard product.